But I think you know it so well that you can afford at certain moments, hopefully the whole thing, but you can afford to just let it happen as opposed to thinking and making it happen. Sometimes that will sound freer and more joyful. Okay, but it's very hard to pinpoint it and hard to teach and hard to do. So let's just start from the beginning and we'll just kind of stop and start if that's okay. Okay, I have a question for you. So what if I asked you to play this opening legato? I'm not saying you should play it legato, but just as an experiment. How would you play it? Can you try? Right, okay, so when you did that, I'm just gonna borrow this for a second. You moved differently, actually. So when you played your way, you moved a little bit more vertically. When you played legato, you grouped the notes with like a rounder movement. So I'm wondering if you can combine the two. What if you use your articulation, but grouping the notes with a more round movement to help phrase? Your overall direction is correct, but just a little bit more nuance might be nice. Do you want to try? So play detached, but your arms should be playing legato, but your fingers should be playing detached. Better. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, so same thing. And I think that it may be the piano, but sometimes a certain note, why am I playing over? Anyway. Sometimes this last note of the measure is like slightly longer than the other notes, so just be careful that they're all the same length. Okay, let's talk about that. So that's one of the instances where I think you sound stuck. And you have very good facility. You don't have trouble moving your fingers, at least it doesn't sound like you do. So I'm not sure whether you feel stuck there or you're trying not to rush, or what are you thinking when you play that group of 16ths?
I think I'm trying not to rush.
You're trying not to rush. Okay, that's what I was wondering, because it sounds like you're really holding it back, but it actually sounds stuck. You sound like you're playing quite heavy. What's your fingering there? Are you using what's written in the score? Oh, okay. So I don't know. I don't think it's your fingering. I'm thinking if you move your wrist a little bit to help as you get towards the fourth and the fifth finger, if you kind of open up your wrist, that might help. But also just maybe think of it more like bubbling. Like if you had champagne. I don't know, are you 21?
Yeah.
You're 21. Okay, so fine, I can talk about champagne. So if you have champagne, you know when you pour it into the glass and it's like mostly bubbles? Oh. Think about bubbles, but bubbling over the glass. I feel like that's what this is. It's like da-da-da-da-da-da, right? There's something very airy about it. It shouldn't sound da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Okay, so maybe in the past you rushed, but now you're like holding it back to the point where it sounds a little stuck. Think also, one last thing, and we'll try it again. Think also about the fingers releasing the notes rather than the fingers playing the notes down. Like we talk a lot about up sound and down sound. Think about an up sound rather than down in the ground. Okay, so maybe start from here. Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, I'm not going to stay on this for very long. Can you just play that right hand one more time? Yeah, what if you moved, play it slowly so I can manipulate your wrist. Yeah, what if you moved like that? Instead of going so low, you just moved a little bit to the side. Would that help? Try. Not too much, otherwise you can't move your fingers, but yeah. And really think about letting 4 and 3 go, because 4 and 3 is like a really problematic combination because, you know, 4, 3, and 5 are our tricky fingers. They share a tendon, and so they like to get tied up. So when you play 4, make sure that you let go of 2, and then when you play 3, make sure you let go of 4. Yeah, that's better. Okay, I know you're playing it slower, but that looked better and it sounded better. Okay, try one more time from there. And think of that when you play it up to tempo. Good. Don't forget the idea of your arm playing legato, even though your fingers are playing detached. It really helps phrase it. If you just think of the fingers playing detached, even if your brain wants you to shape it, it sounds flat compared to, I'm not saying you played flat, but compared to when you actually move in a smooth way, it sounds so much better. Okay, good. So now I want you to pick, you can either pick this one or you can pick this one, because they both kind of have the same problem that these had. This one. Okay, what, did you pick this one because you think it's easier? Yes. You should pick the harder one so we can work on it. Can you play it really slowly for me? We're going to just kind of put a microscope on it for a second. Okay, so I feel like you're doing a beautiful, your arm looks beautiful, you look like you're relaxed. I feel like, though, your fingers themselves are not completely sure when they go down and when they come up. They're kind of all trying to play at the same time, even at that slow tempo. Were you trying to play differently physically than when you played it up to tempo, or the same, or you don't know?
I'm trying to like play exactly the same when I play slow.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, so that's what I was asking, because sometimes people change everything physically when they play slower, and then it doesn't really help. So yeah, I'm thinking if you do exactly what you did with your arm, but you make sure that your fingers are coordinated when they're playing down, and mostly thinking about when you let them go. Don't overlap any of your fingers, if that makes sense. If you overlap, there's places in piano playing where you might want to slightly overlap two notes, but this is not one of those places, right? You want this to sound like bubbly and energetic and lively. So I think it's really important to make sure that your fingers are communicating with one another. Okay, if that makes sense. So let's start right from here. Good. Are you thinking of the notes going down?
Sometimes.
I want you to try on all the 16th notes. I want you to think of picking up your fingers. Reverse it. Imagine that you have to, that in order to make a sound, your fingers have to let go. I don't mean like this, right? I don't mean like stick your fingers in here. I just mean release the key. Like imagine that the key has a little spring in it, like a trampoline, and it's like popping your fingers off instead of the fingers going down. Because that down, like down in every note kind of sound, that's what makes it sound stuck. Okay, better. Yeah, better. The only two notes that didn't sound that great were the did you hear it? It's like the thumb and the second finger, I think. So you can work on it, but it's really all about listening, listening to the texture. And if you hear certain notes that sound stuck or slower or overlapped, then you know you need to work on that spot. Okay. Why did you not pick this one? I know you said because it's harder, but why do you think this one's harder?
Because the finger is like finger number.
The fingers is the finger combination? Okay. Let me hear that again. Start from there, a little bit before. Yeah, again, I think it's actually the same problem. We won't work on it because I don't want to get stuck on one thing, but I think that it's about releasing the fingers, thinking about the up sound. And I would practice it like really slowly, like let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, and actively release the finger. We can talk about that later after the class, how you do that. But that's actually, I think, the problem. Because if there's a certain fingering combination that's difficult, it's most likely because you're thinking about 2 or 3 fingers as a combination. Playing one note at a time is not hard, right? Like if you put your finger on one note and you play it, anyone can do that. So if it's just one note and then the next note and everything else is relaxed, and then the next note and everything else is relaxed. And then of course your arm puts it all together, but I think you're thinking of it because musically, of course, you have to think of it as one long phrase, right? But sometimes physically, you have to make sure that each finger is releasing when it's supposed to. Anyways, let's move on, okay? So let's start right from there, and we'll just go through it. Good. I think these also can be lighter. Those also sound a little bit, same kind of thing, right? So I would probably make a little bit less of the second half step. So instead of, I would probably play slightly softer on the second two. Yes, like I really like that exaggerated diminuendo that you just did. That to me sounded, I mean, I don't know, maybe someone else told you not to do that, but I really like that. I think it sounds really graceful and elegant. Okay, continue. Yes, nice. Yeah, so same thing. You need a lot more. Like, if I were your teacher, I would be putting all these circular, swirly things in your music because I feel like that's how it should sound. The way music is printed is so problematic, if you think about it, because it's like dots on a page. Dot, 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 right? But that's not how it should sound. It shouldn't sound like pointillistic. You're very musical, so don't get me wrong. I don't mean you're not musical. It's just that sometimes either you're afraid to over-exaggerate the nuances because you think it's Mozart, or you're thinking of like the longer phrase. In this case, you're thinking of the longer phrase and not the tiny little things. But I think these should sound like swirls. So da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And that means that you can't play equally heavy on all of them, right? Try. Good. And what do you do when you have two measures that are then repeated? What should you do?
Usually I play smaller or bigger.
Okay, so the correct answer is just do something different. Yeah. It doesn't have to be always softer. It doesn't always have to be louder. It doesn't have to be more left hand. It doesn't have to be, shaped in a different way. Like I'm saying, all of those things are possibilities. It's not that there's only one way. But to me, it sounded exactly the same. And that's a problem. If it's the same, then it's boring. And boring is the worst. Like I would rather you play ugly or with bad taste than to play boring. Boring is the worst thing a pianist can do or a musician can do. Okay, go for it. Yeah, what if you detach these notes a little bit more, these bottom notes in the left hand, just to give it a little bit more energy? You want to try? It's a possibility. You can try it. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Okay, good. Be really careful. This happens sometimes also in the last movement. Your ear goes to the right hand, right? And the right hand actually sounds really nice, but what's wrong with that? You can hear it, right? Yeah, so you're not actually accenting it, but you're playing it the same as the first beat. So then I think that's really generally what I am getting at with all these little things that I'm saying. What it actually boils down to is that the 6/8 meter has to sound like it's dancing, and it doesn't sometimes, right? So it's not that you always just accent the strong beats, but you have to lighten up the weak beats for sure, okay? So try. Better. Mm-hmm. Sorry, keep going. Okay, good. To me, this also sounded slower. It was just because it wasn't shaped. What are you listening to here? Are you listening to the right hand? Are you listening to the left hand? Are you listening to the longer phrase? Are you not listening?
Maybe right hand.
Right hand. Okay, what if you tried listening to right hand and then also listening to left hand as if they're having a conversation? That might liven it up a little bit. Yeah, like, so you could imagine like these three notes. You could imagine that right there as having a little bit more shape. It might help. Good, without getting heavy and longer though, but that was the idea. Yeah, so these were the spots I was saying. That was actually a little bit better, but these measures rushed. At least they sounded like they were rushing to me. So make sure you're still feeling the two, you know, 1, 2, 1, 2. Don't just think of all of this as just shoom. Because if it just is like a waterfall with no pulse, it will probably rush. Better. So one other suggestion, this is just a general suggestion for all piano pieces probably, but specifically, I think you could apply it to this. I mean, you know this piece so well, right? It's memorized, it was solid. Do you do a lot of hand separate practicing these days? I'm sure you did at the beginning, but. I don't think so either. The reason why I say that is because as a general rule, I hear your right hand a lot more cared for than your left hand. So your left hand, a lot of times, I mean, we all do this, you know, it's like, oh, it's just chords, it's just harmony, it's just whatever. When the left hand has something interesting, for the most part, you are paying attention. But just because the left hand is just chords, right, or just harmony or whatever, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be phrased, doesn't mean it shouldn't be voiced, doesn't mean that it shouldn't have lively pulse. And I feel like if you practiced your left hand by itself, as if it were the whole piece, the only part of the piece, that would improve the entire thing so much. So that might be something you can try after your recital. You don't have to try. Sometimes if you do that right before the recital, it's suddenly like just confusing. But after your recital, you can try just playing by memory or even with the score, whatever feels more comfortable, sections of the piece with just the left hand. And try to make it as if that left hand part is the only music left in the universe. How would you play it if it's the only music left in the universe? You would definitely pay much more attention to it, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and skip a little. Let's just go straight to the development. Okay, that's one of those spots, probably because you're using pedal, that the end of the slur to me sounds too sudden. Is there any way that you can try to convey what you're trying to convey with the character and still use the pedal and change the color without just chopping that so much? Do you think? It's not easy, I know. Yeah, so I'll tell you my personal opinion. This is probably not correct as in, you know, performance practice. Performance practice people will probably jump all over me for saying this, but my opinion is that those slur marks, those slurs are, yes, I understand what you're doing. There's a breath there, right? Yes, I get that. But I feel like they're more to show you how to nuance it, how to shape it, rather than just having like a cut completely. That's my opinion. Because I don't like, you know, I don't like those sudden, to me it just sounds like a gap in the sound. And it doesn't, unless you do it very expertly, it just doesn't sound like it has a flow to it. So I'm wondering if you could do what you're doing. I'm not saying you have to change it, but I'm wondering if you could also do like a little bit of a swell and a diminuendo, and that might help. If this note is not so loud, the last note, it might actually help it not sound so cut. Do you want to try? That was better. Yeah, even in the forte one, okay, coming up, still diminuendo. Yeah. Hey, hey, that was it. So see, we made a compromise and it sounded pretty good, didn't it? Okay, keep going. Okay, good. Now I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Can you play just your left hand for just these first, I don't know, 4 measures or so from here? Just to there. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so are you thinking of this group and then that group and then that group? Or are you thinking of all of it together?
I'm trying to group in line.
Okay, all right, that's what I would do too. I mean, obviously it's all together, right? But I think the subgroups would exactly be what you just demonstrated. That I think if you can shape a little bit more those groups, it's going to have a lot more forward direction. It's going to be more interesting. And same thing with the right hand. What's difficult is to be able to do both hands at once. All right, and then I think this, actually when you played the left hand by itself, this had more shape. So when you play both hands, try to have that much shape. Okay, both hands. Nice. Yeah, that was better. Okay, so just basically is proving my point that you need to just pay a little bit more attention with your ears to the left hand also, okay? Yes, okay, so when you have, there's so many moments in this movement where you have these conversations, right? Where the left hand and the right hand are having these conversations. So if you're not, and you may be thinking this in your head, but if you're not very obviously showing the listener that conversation by actually like switching your ears from one hand to the next, then it's a little confusing. So our job as interpreters, right, performers of someone else's music, is to kind of teach it to the listener in a way. Make it really obvious. So I think that I hear everything, but sometimes my ear doesn't know what I'm supposed to follow. Like I'm not so sure. So can you make the conversations a little bit more obvious? And how do you do that? You shape the important material in the hand that has it, and then you shape it really well when it's in the other hand, and then you go back and forth. Okay? So it's like you know it's coming because you know the piece really well. But let's imagine that the listener was hearing it for the first time, right? It's so delightful. So you got to get back in touch with that, like the first time you ever heard this piece, how you felt. Okay, try it. Yes, I think it was the left hand again. It was like the left hand didn't have, but that time was much better. But before, the left hand just didn't have that same kind of shape to it, and that time it did. At least I think it did. I think it was much better. Okay, try from here. Good. Now, when one technical thing, I don't like to talk a ton about technique when I give master classes because it's honestly not that helpful because technique is something that needs to be changed over time. It's not helpful to just say a technical thing and try to fix it right there. But there is one technical thing that I want to just mention because I think it's applicable to all of piano playing. When you do a crescendo or a swell, be really careful that you don't press with your arm. You have a tendency, and a lot of people have this tendency, it's not just you, but you have a tendency to lower your wrist and like push a little. You know that already? Yeah. So that actually makes it harder for your fingers to move. Let's make an experiment, okay? Not with the notes of the piece, but let's try to play a Do major scale. But I want you to put your wrist really low, and I want you to like push on every note. Okay, at this speed, it's actually uncomfortable but possible. Okay, try. Really low, just like ridiculously low. Okay, it's possible. You can play at that speed. Now I want you to do it like twice as fast. But still press and still have your wrist really low. Faster, and still really pressing. Yeah, you're better at it than I am. Your wrist needs to be lower though. I'm demonstrating the wrong technique, if anyone was wondering. Okay. Okay, so So you can do it better than I can do it, actually. But is it comfortable?
No.
Do your fingers feel free? No. If we press, actually, on any one note, does the note get louder? It does? No, it doesn't. Not on one note, right? Of course not. So no matter what we do to that note, once the hammer hits the string, it's not going to get louder. It's actually going to get softer. So pressing or pushing or, shoving that wrist really low because we're trying to make a crescendo, it's just working against us. It would be just as silly as like trying to take a step and then like trying to push your foot into the floor and then run at the same time. Like, what? It wouldn't work. So when you want to run, you need to actually pick up your feet, not push them into the ground, right? So it's just something that I think you should think about. When you do a crescendo, don't push, don't press. And I think lowering the wrist actually makes it harder. This is my opinion. I think it's physiologically true, but lowering your wrist actually makes it harder for your fingers to move, okay? All right, so I think you can continue to apply a lot of these same things. I just want to go to the end of the movement, if you don't mind. This is a tricky passage, isn't it? I could tell you were very concentrated here. You played it really, really well. But I want you to trust yourself a little bit more here, because this is not easy. I remember I had a student who was playing this last year, and she played the whole movement so well, except for that one page. And we worked on that page. I mean, I tried everything, and it was always a struggle just because it's so contrapuntal, right? And there's just a lot going on. So you play it very well, but it sounds a little flat. So I'm wondering if you can trust yourself more and enjoy all the conversations and enjoy all the shapes and not worry so much, okay? Hopefully that won't throw you off. Let's try maybe just from the top of the page. Is that good? Yeah, actually, that was actually better. I think that, again, your left hand is less nuanced than your right hand, but that was better that time. I think that it's important to have two sets of ears. Can you grow another set of ears for me, please? You need 2 ears and then another set of 2 ears. Of course, I'm joking, but you need to be able to listen to the new voice that's coming in, but you also need to listen to the end of what came before. And so sometimes, like for example, let's take these three or four notes here. You were so interested in what was coming in, and you played this very well, that these notes were kind of thrown away. So is there any way that you can keep like 10% of your hearing at least on the end of what you played before, so that the last few notes of that little gesture are cared for, so they don't rush, so that they have a nice diminuendo? And that applies to each one of them, okay? Because you do a very nice job, especially of bringing in the right hand. The right hand ones, I hear it's almost like a trumpet call or something. But bringing in the left hand, I think, and shaping the left hand could probably be a little bit more exaggerated. And then keeping 10% of your ears on the end of what came before, so that it's not just thrown away. And that also applies like for these notes. I noticed that like once in a while, the last 3 notes of a measure would be just kind of forgotten about. We have to have, it's crazy. Playing the piano is probably the hardest thing, I don't know, a human can do. Maybe I'm just saying that because I'm a pianist, but I really do feel that way, because I feel like we have to have ears in 3 different time zones. We have to have ears in the past, because we have to hear what we just played so that we can spontaneously connect that to what we're playing at the moment. We must have ears in the present, because if you're not listening to what you're playing, it's going to come out totally off, right? And then we also have to be listening and thinking ahead to some extent about what's coming next. The present listening, of course, would be the most important, but we're constantly monitoring those other time zones. And so it's not easy. It's not easy to listen to everything. That's why I said you need to grow another set of ears. But let's try it one more time. Same spot. going to do something very cruel. I hope you will forgive me. Will you forgive me?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not so cruel because I know how hard it is, and so if you cannot do it or if you miss a lot of notes, it doesn't matter. You don't have to play all the right notes, okay? But what I want you to try to do is I want you to play this section slower with your eyes closed, okay? So if you miss all the notes, I don't care. It's really hard to play with one's eyes closed, especially when you're jumping all around. The reason why I want you to do this is not because I want to torture you. It's because I want you to actually see if when you close your eyes, you can listen differently, okay? But you can play slower. If you don't want to play slower, you can play the same speed, but I think playing slower will also help you listen better, okay? But you're allowed to miss as many notes as you want, okay? It's okay. You can open your eyes. If you get lost, just open your eyes. It's totally fine. Yeah, you're right here, I think. Are you right there?
No.
You were playing this one. Okay, interesting. So it's very interesting. I thought you would be missing the leaps, like when you had to move your hand and start, but you're actually not missing those. You're missing the 16th notes. Like you're getting confused on those. That's really interesting. That actually kind of confirms what I was saying, that you're not listening to the ends of things. You're listening to the beginnings. And you even know, your hands even know how to do those leaps with your eyes closed. But this, which is all in the same spot, you're getting confused. So it's actually quite revealing. I didn't do that to torture you. I did it as an experiment to sort of see what it did. How did it feel to you, besides terrifying and horrible? But I mean, did it feel different, or did you listen differently?
Yeah, a little bit.
Can you describe that at all? Because I can't. I wish I could just like crawl inside your brain and know exactly what you felt. But can you describe that to me?
If I close my eyes, I think I'm trying to listen every note because I don't know which note is right, and I'm like if I'm like playing right, so I think I'm trying to listen every note.
Okay, so obviously, when we take away one sense, that's going to change the way our other senses work, right? So that's one thing I feel like when I close my eyes, my tactile sensation changes and also my aural sensation changes. The way I listen changes. So that's really interesting that you said that you felt like you were listening to every note. Can you listen to every note when your eyes are open? I want you to listen to the big picture, but I also want you to hear every note, right? Not like in a vertical way, but just paying attention to every single note. So play with your eyes open and see if you can keep that like three-dimensional listening that you had going on when your eyes were closed. Okay, try. Okay, I thought that was better. I really did. To me, it sounded different. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. But no, I really do think that sounded different. So before, I think you were listening to the entrance notes. And then the rest of it, you were just letting it happen. And that's why when you closed your eyes, you were getting tangled on those other 16th notes because you were like, wait, what were they? Because you weren't listening to them. Your ear wasn't listening to them specifically enough. That was affecting the shaping and the timing and just the overall phrasing. So I think eyes closed practice is a very good technique. I have to say that of all the things I've learned over the years, I've learned a lot about how to practice. I've taught, several times a workshop on practice techniques. I've thought a lot about it. I've read books about it. I'm not saying I'm the expert, but I've been really interested in it. When I was growing up, I didn't know how to practice. I just played everything slowly. That was my whole practice method, you know? My teachers just said, like, oh, play it slowly. Here's a metronome, right? So I got really curious about it in my 20s and 30s. I'm totally still in my 30s, so, right? No, now that I'm 40, I've been interested in it for 20 years, right? So anyways, the point is that of all the things that I've learned and tried, eyes closed practice is the one thing that I think makes the most difference. It's so useful for so many things. I think that it's great for listening. It's great for learning the geography of the keyboard. It actually improves accuracy over time if you do it correctly. So I know none of my students do it, but I tell them that at least 30% of their practice time should be eyes closed. Of course, it can, it has to be pieces that you have memorized, right? But it's really a game changer. So if you have never applied that in your practice time, or you do very little of it, that might be something that you can start incorporating in everything, not just this piece, okay? All right, so let's just jump to the last page. Go from there. Yeah, be careful about that same thing, the rushing thing. You go like, good. Okay, one other thing I want to say about the 16th notes. When you have both hands playing the 16th notes together, you have to be really careful about the texture, because if you're overlapping in one hand or both hands, that texture suddenly sounds really thick and like not Mozartian. It sounds like that crystal bowl that we were talking about is suddenly dirty, right? So be really, really careful when you have both hands playing the 16th notes, even more so that you don't overlap the notes or smear the notes together. I know why you're doing it, because you're trying to shape. But you've got to shape and pick up your fingers at the same time, okay? So think about, this is one thing that I think really helps. Think about imagine that there's actually like a little bit of airspace in between each 16th note. You've heard of the word leggero, right? Right? Leggero, light. Even though it's forte, you can still play leggero. You can still play non-legato, right? Non-legato is kind of like this in between, right? It's not really staccato, but it's not legato. So if you think a little bit more non-legato and you actually imagine that there's like a little bit of air in between each note, that might help. Do you want to try one more time from there? Without rushing, though. I'm so picky. Better. Good. You know what I was thinking? That was actually better. I was thinking it happens mostly when you try to play loud. When you try to play forte is when I hear that like stuck feeling. Or when you're trying to shape. You don't do it, because when you try to play piano, you don't really do it. Like these notes were great. And then here it started getting stuck again. So that might actually be related to the pressing thing. You might want to think about that, how I told you not to press when you try to do a crescendo. All right, continue from, I don't know, the pickup to here. Whatever's good. If it's easier to start here, you can start there too. Okay, good. Here, what are the most interesting notes in this measure? It's sort of a trick question, but is this really, really interesting? Are those really interesting notes, or fa sharp re? What's more interesting? I think so too. I think so too. So be careful that you don't get super heavy on these half-step notes. Those need to be kind of bubbly again. All right, right from there. Yeah, so I would actually go ahead and play it, and I'm going to outline what I think is important down here. So you just play, and I'm going to play along. We're going to do a little duet. Get ready, and. Right? Did you hear that? Those are the notes that I want you to bring out. Okay, try again. Yes. it's basically outlined here in the left hand, but in your right hand, everything was getting heavy and it was like covering that up. I think that sounded better. Okay, start from here. Okay, good. So same thing here. I didn't point all of the instances out because I didn't want to be obnoxious. But this is another instance where I think, for my taste, the end of the slur is like a little bit too obvious. So again, we try that technique of playing a little bit softer so that it's not so hiccupy. Good. Okay, how do you think of, last question, how do you think of this 16th note run? Do you think of it as all one big giant staircase, or are you grouping it?
Big one line.
Okay, it is. You're right, it is. But just the same way that the opening theme is one line, but it also has subgroups that you can shape, I feel like it's really hard to make a crescendo over those two measures. So can you try to shape it a crescendo to here, the downbeat, and then starting from the note right after the downbeat, another shape? So it's kind of like one big crescendo, but it's also two crescendos at the same time. Can you try? It's just kind of like a trick that we're going to be playing. It's going to sound like, we're going to try to make it sound like one big crescendo, but if you just don't drop at all here for the second measure, it's going to start sounding really, really pressed. So think of one crescendo and then drop a little bit and then another crescendo. Good. Okay. I said it was the last question, but I lied. Because I remember thinking this when you played the first time. Why do you crescendo and then suddenly subito piano there? Is that an artistic decision that you made? Did someone tell you to do that?
No, I think it's just my habit.
Okay. I'm not saying that it's wrong. For me personally, it's extremely unsatisfying. I'm like, oh, wow, this big high point, and then suddenly, randomly, you come down. I mean, I understand that it's an intense harmony, but for me, building it up so much and then coming to a subito piano is really, I don't know. It's kind of like if you get really excited, you wait in line for the roller coaster and you're right there, and you're about to get on the roller coaster, and then they're like, sorry, we're closed. It's just such a letdown. You know what I mean? So try it. Let's see what happens. Try it and actually go to this chord and see what happens. See if you like it. Okay, that was better. What if you really went for it? Within the realm of Mozart. I'm not saying, go crazy at Prokofiev on me, but you still cushioned it. It was like you were gonna play it forte and then nope, you played it mezzo forte. Can you actually play it forte? Yeah. Okay, for me, I like that. What did you think? Was it super offensive or you liked it okay?
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. I feel like you arrive, you climbed the mountain and you say, I made it, and then you enjoy the view, as opposed to climbing the mountain and saying, oh, actually, on second thought, I'm just going to go back down. So there are times in music where I think that kind of, crescendo to a subito piano can be really effective. But here, for me, it just sounds really like a letdown. So you can decide what you want to do in the recital, but that's my opinion. Okay? All right, why don't you just finish it up from the pickup to that if you want. Good. Maybe not so obvious again with the cuts in the left hand. Yes. Okay. All right. Nice. So again, that technique of still doing that disconnection but not making it like a hiccup, I think you can apply to the whole movement. That's my opinion. But I think playing the last note of the slur softer helps a lot. Okay, we probably won't have time to do the entire last movement, but why don't we just do a little bit of the exposition? And before we get started, what are some words that come to mind when you think of this movement? Or do you think, I mean, do you think of a specific character or descriptive words?
A cute piece.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely has some delicate moments, cute moments. Anything else? What about the mood? Because cute is not really a mood. You could be cute but be angry, and you could also be cute and be, you know, exhilarated. And I'm not looking for a specific word. I'm just curious.
A little bit bright.
Bright? Okay. That's not really a mood, I guess. Maybe it could be. Feeling bright. But yeah, okay. So cute and bright. So let's start a little bit. And I want you to think about how you can translate those words, those descriptive words that you just told me, into the texture and into the feeling of pulse. And how would that change your playing? Let's just try from the beginning. Okay, good. So when you play the left hand here, especially on these, you're playing very light and you're playing really non-legato. I actually am wondering if you could apply that more to all these runs. What do you think? Even though it's forte, I don't think that it needs to be heavy. Okay, so again, it's kind of similar to what I was talking about in the first movement, the up sound, non-legato. Okay, let's try the ones up here though, maybe from here. Good. Can you play just the left hand? Do you hear those clumps of notes? Do you hear? You're actually physically holding down this note and this note. Did you realize you're doing that? Yeah, I mean, not as much as I'm doing, but you're actually like overlapping these three notes every time. And then not so much on the descending patterns, but the three that are ascending. So can you let the fingers go? Okay, good, but it still has to be even, right? That was better because you weren't overlapping, but it was a little bit uneven. So can you try to keep it, listen really carefully, and the fingers have to go down exactly when you tell them to, and they need to release exactly when you tell them to. They can't just be like, you know, undisciplined children that just run around doing whatever they want. Okay, one more thing, and then we'll move on. Can you try to play it staccato? Not at that speed, a little slower. Interesting. You can play a little slower if you want, but I want you to play it evenly. It's extremely uneven. Do you hear it? Yeah, your fingers are not coordinated. Whether you're playing slower or staccato or, you know, smoother. These fingers, I think you're playing always with what, 4-3-2?
Yes.
Yeah, the 4-3-2 combination is extremely undisciplined. So you've got to control when the 4 plays, when the 3 plays, and when the 2 plays. Try it again staccato, but slower. Okay, good. Now play it exactly like that, but every note quite loudly, but don't change what you're doing physically, because I like the fact that you're not pressing with your arm. No, still staccato. Okay, now I want you to combine that feeling that you had in the fingers, which was even and one finger at a time. Combine that with the shaping arm that you had before. And now don't play staccato, but continue to feel each finger when it goes down and when it releases. Good. One more time, and can you think of picking up the fingers? Don't think about putting the fingers down. Like almost you're going to play staccato, but at the last minute you don't. Better. That was better. Not totally even, but much better. So I think this touch, the non-legato touch, is something you're going to really need to work on. Because in every Mozart sonata or every Mozart piece, you're going to need it, and in other composers too. And you kind of have two modes. You either have legato, and then legato fast, which means you actually are overlapping, or staccato. But you don't really have that non-legato totally figured out yet. And so that's definitely something I think you can work on. It'll help you so much. All right, you do it randomly, like I was saying. You did it here. So it's just a matter of figuring out how you're doing it and then applying it to all the spots that would require it. Let's just go right from there. Good. Can you shape this a little bit more? Make it kind of funny. Okay, good. Oh, that was really nice. In your octaves in the left hand, are you trying to bring out one note more than the other?
In right hand?
No, left hand. Are you trying to bring the top note out or the bottom note out? Top note. Okay. Yeah, so I think that it's important that you make sure you phrase it, but you also voice the octave. And I felt like I heard it on like 2 out of 4, but on 2 of them it wasn't quite as clear. So make sure it's consistent. Yeah, this is so beautiful the way you shape that. What about this? What about your left hand? I keep repeating the same thing. Left hand. Okay, try shaping your left hand. Try to start right on it. Without rushing. I don't know. I would do like a little swell on each one. Do you know what I mean? Can you try that? Yeah, something like that. You have to practice it, but something like that. Yes, okay, just a little bit more, and then we can maybe jump to the end. Go from here. Okay, good. So this is a spot also where I felt like the detached slurs were getting in the way of the character. What would you say the character of this section is here? Is it different from the beginning? Is it the same? Is it still cute and bright?
Another kind of voice than like first.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a contrasting mood. So it's a little bit more melancholy because you have all those half steps, you know? Those 2-note phrase half steps. So it sounds like someone's sighing or something. There may be a conversation where everyone's sighing and talking about something maybe a little bit more serious. So I feel like if you chop it up like that, it just sounds, it interrupts the flow and it interrupts the character for my taste. So again, I'm wondering if you can just round the edges a little bit of those notes. Okay, try it. Okay, I love that. To me, that sounds so much better when you don't play that the end of that starts so short. So think about that throughout the movement and think about ways that you can just round the edges a little bit. Okay, let's just play the very, very end. A lot of the ideas that we talked about in the first movement can apply to this one, so I think we need to go through every single measure. All right, maybe let's start from here. So I understand you're trying to make the difference at the end here between the eighths and the quarter note. The first time when you played it through, I felt like the last note was really long. So yeah, just I would enjoy the silence. There's a rest at the end, right? So enjoy the silence after that quarter note. Yeah, so do you have any questions for me about what we talked about, or any questions on something we didn't talk about?
Actually, these days I felt like once I arrive certain level of any piece, it's not easy to develop more and more, like more musical or like something like that.
You feel like it gets stuck musically?
So
Okay. Do you know why that is, or are you asking me why that is?
I don't know why.
Okay. There could be a lot of reasons why. One thing could be that especially when you have a recital so soon, you might be a little bit scared to try things because I can tell that you're a very serious student. You're very disciplined, right? And you want the recital to go well. I mean, everyone wants their recitals to go well, but I can tell that you're like, okay, right? And that's a good quality, but sometimes that personality trait can actually make your practicing not very creative. So I would surmise that your practice methods have become stale. Like bread that's been left out for days, right? It's not very exciting to eat that. So that's usually, in my opinion, when you know a piece really well, you tend to just go to the practice room and play it the same way you play it every time. And so you end up losing spontaneity, and you end up getting very set in your way of doing whatever you were doing musically, or not doing whatever you were doing or not doing. And so, I don't want to do anything that's going to throw you off for your recital. But in the future, in the month before the recital, I would try to spice up your practice routines. So, one really simple things I mentioned today, practicing your left hand again by itself and practicing with your eyes closed. But there's so many things that you can do that can just kind of, take you out of that box that you've put yourself in. And that's actually, I think, the gateway to improving musically, allowing that creativity to come in and not be afraid of it. Not be afraid of trying something new. Because change is not always a bad thing, right? A lot of times change can lead to breakthrough. So that's my opinion. My opinion is probably that your practicing is a little bit boring. You agree? Yeah, so if you have questions about that later, you feel free to ask me. I can give you some ideas about practicing. But yeah, sure. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for playing. I really enjoyed listening to you in person. And I can't wait to hear you next time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much to everyone who may still be listening for your patience for this long class. And I would like to give you a round of applause for your beautiful performance. So thank you so much and good night.